Brilliant. So, I've always loved visual communication. When I was growing up, I had four older brothers who were all artists or designers. So, naturally, I went to art school. It's just kind of what you did in my family. And I studied graphic design, which I loved. But I think that my lecturers always knew that there was something a bit strange about me. I can remember filling up pages and pages of a sketchbook where I had all these complicated animated transitions, and I'd worked out that the number I'd need was based on the Fibonacci sequence and there were these calculations. And I'm sure they took one look at it and thought, what on earth are we going to do with this? So yeah, all the other graduates went on to do glamorous things in corporate identity and advertising and things like that. And I went to Exeter Medical School in the UK and studied for a PhD about how to present health research data, some of which actually led on to that diagram that Helena has already showed you. So there we go. I learned about kind of medical research, systematic reviews, and meta-analysis, and thought really long and hard about how to present this data visually, and found that there was this whole world called data viz or infographics. People were taking data and representing it with visual elements like shape, size, and color. At last, the Fibonacci-loving designer had found a home. And fast forward a few years, I did a postdoc as well, and then after that, decided to kind of move to publishing and try and change things from the inside. So I switched over to work for the BMJ about 10 years ago, and we are the British Medical Journal, as you say, published since 1840. It's an internationally focused general medical journal. Um, it publishes research, but also educational content, and we do news and views as well. And we have a website, which is the kind of main way that we present things these days. And we still have a weekly print journal, though, and it's delivered every week to all members of the British Medical Association in the UK, direct to their home address. And this is what happens to it. Turns out, doctors are really, really very busy trying to, uh, you know, actually do their jobs, and they're under increasing pressure. It's really hard to find time to keep abreast of current events, even though there's this brilliant kind of wonderful, uh, well-researched content. And it's perhaps you know, understandable when what we produce is very kind of dry and looks a bit like this. So my job is to kind of present this in a more kind of engaging way, I suppose. So this is a little sort of scrolling story that we did with the information from that article, where you can sort of scroll down and interact with the data and have a little look to see. This is about the gender pay gap in England's NHS, and it's got all sorts of information about that. And it doesn't take that long to make things like this. Well, I mean, it does. It took a while to make things like that. It took me a couple of weeks. But compared to the amount of effort that people go into to actually research this stuff, it's years and years of people's lives. I don't think this extra few weeks of effort is really that much at the end, and it can really transform how people see the research. We've tried to kind of transform our educational content and make graphics that kind of encapsulate and store knowledge, so you can maybe triangulate on a diagnosis from multiple different angles at once and try and sort of narrow things down. We've tried to create things like this COVID transmission graph, where you can try different options out, put masks on, put visors on, change what people are doing. Um, uh, I like coughing. Do coughing. No, exercising is next. There's coughing. Oh yeah, coughing is a good one. That goes really dark purple. We a lot. I'm kind of showing you all the flashy visual stuff, but actually the majority, the sort of interactive stuff, but the majority of what we do is kind of quite slightly quicker static diagrams like these. Initially, I focused more on interactive stuff, but we realized that actually creating a kind of one-page visual summary that can be sent out is quite valuable in a number of ways. I mean, obviously it's quicker to make, but it's quicker to read, and there's a kind of honesty about having a page worth of information. You kind of know how long it's going to take you to look through it, and they can be shared more easily on social media. And those, I think, have proved quite successful. I quite like this photograph that someone sent us of all of the ones that they'd torn out and kept in a filing cabinet. And for the research content, we've increasingly started looking at these visual abstracts, which are even smaller. They're just like 1000 by 1000 pixels, and again, sort of aimed at social media, that encapsulate some of the key information about a trial's design and its key findings. So I'll talk a little bit more about those later on. We started making these in 2018, I believe, and I think we do kind of one a month now, on just to kind of we select one paper to have a visual abstract. We publish like between 12 and 13 papers a month, so we choose one of them. And then, yep, journalism is a kind of mix of quick reactive content for news and views and longer term kind of features and investigations. And this piece was a timeline of the first 2 years of COVID, and it's got the four kind of countries of the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and it shows the kind of different waves of different variants of COVID, and then the little circles show different kind of actions that were taken, lockdown measures and things. It shows that how there were sort of different strategies in different places and how that played out. And this is kind of runs across the bottom of 4 pages of the journal, which is why there's kind of those grey gutters in the middle there. That's the page fold. It's not just UK content we cover, though. This is one looking at the countries that produce COVID-19 vaccines around the world and looking at how much of their populations they can vaccinate. And it turns out that the ones that produce more vaccines tend to vaccinate more of their population, surprisingly, despite the fact that it was supposed to be shared out. So, those kind of messages we can present visually in these kind of ways. Um, and then these are some of our rapid recommendation graphics. And this is a collaboration with the Magic Consortium, who do kind of, evidence-based recommendations, big systematic reviews, and put together panels of clinicians uh, uh, and methodologists and patients who sort of consider the evidence and then they come up with their recommendations. And we've kind of turned these into almost like a standard format where we know how we're going to present them. And I've written some code which basically takes a big spreadsheet which shows, oh, it's a strong recommendation. Here's all the evidence profiles. Here's all the data behind them. And it kind of spits out one of these graphics. Um, so yeah, we kind of had to automate that during the pandemic because the evidence about COVID was changing so quickly. We did a kind of living version of it that had to be updated every few months as new evidence became clear. So we've kind of done a lot of work during the pandemic on kind of automating this process to make it quicker, and that's been quite productive, I think. We've even branched out into making word games. So here was a word game called Clinical, where you had to slide the words around to make another word. And it just takes sort of a few seconds to do it. We did one every day for I think 90 days at the beginning of 2022, I believe. No, 2023. So we're considering like how we might it became a bit too time intensive to set these, so we're considering whether we might do something a bit different in future, which is a bit more automatically set. So, but they're still there. The archive's up on the website if you want to go and see those. They're quite good fun. And this is a link to our infographics page. I forgot to ask Helena, but I'm presuming that we can share these slides afterwards if people don't have to like quickly write down these notes, but I expect we'll do that. Um,
We can do
and
it, no problem.
Thanks, Helena. Great. And so this is the video's infographics page. You can see most of them on there. Um, if you want to see our visual abstracts, just Google visual abstracts, and it's the top hit, which I'm quite pleased about. And they obviously do pretty well online. These are some of the sort of better performing tweets that we have had. Lots of engagements. People tend to click on them more than other stuff. Obviously, these are kind of cherry picked a few good ones here, but we always compare to kind of like our normal tweets, and it's not uncommon for them to sort of do 200 or 300% better in terms of impressions and engagement than normal tweets do because people just kind of, I guess, can see them and interact with them. And I've increasingly been getting into kind of working out how we can do the simple stuff better. So looking at how we present graphs and charts, kind of the culture of visualization within the organization as well, and sort of producing style guides as to how we should present things visually. We're looking at how to get a broader range of people making them, not just me. So we're starting to do these like interactive charts, which should be we've done maybe 5 papers with interactive charts so far, and we're going to be doing a few more over the rest of this year, and then deciding whether we want to sort of ramp them up full time. So that was quite an interesting project to be working on. Um, and then sometimes we do even weirder stuff like this data sculpture that we did for the NHS's 70th birthday. It was installed in BMA House, which is where our office is in London. And and it was 12 cabinets, and we commissioned a group of artists from Goldsmiths College in London to make this for us. We sort of ran a short list and worked out who's going to make it and work with them to find the data behind it. And this showed kind of the amount of money that the England's NHS spends on people throughout their life. And each one is a kind of marble run. A marble runs through it, and the time it takes to run through shows you how much is spent on each age group. So the first one, which is the top right, which is made of kind of speculums and stuff, um, is the age group 0 to 10, I think, and it sort of runs through that in maybe about 5 or 10 seconds, and then there's a really quick one for the next one, which is kind of 10 to 20, I think, and then it goes through and it gets longer and longer and longer until the bottom left there, which is age 80 to 90, takes about 2 minutes to go through. So that was kind of an interesting display to have on. It was supposed to run for a month, but it ended up getting extended for a few months. So that was nice to see. Um, and then, as well as the BMJ work, I've been ramping up my freelance work recently. So I do 4 days a week at the BMJ now and 1 day a week freelance work. And that's normally people who I kind of work with at the BMJ who come back to me to do other projects. They've got other things happening. So I do quite a lot of work on sort of climate and environment related stuff, which is another passion of mine, and particularly its relationship to health. So this is one about ocean plastic and the kind of problems with that. Really nice kind of illustration led piece. I didn't do the illustration, I have to say, I commissioned that, but it was a good project to get that kind of they needed something which really would grab people's attention. I think it works well for that. Um, this is another person who I'd worked with before who came back to me and said, "I've actually got a PhD student doing this project, and this literature review. We want to find a way of visualizing it." This was about live tissue training in trauma and looking at the kind of different places that people were publishing, and the kind of influence of whether people had military funding or whether they had military primary authors or secondary authors. That was an interesting piece to work on. A few kind of animated in or interactive projects as well, not just sort of static stuff. This was a big network of the kind of influence of uh, well, sort of how human health is affected by activities in the seas and the oceans, I suppose. So, the way that we kind of interact with that space and how that affects our health positively and negatively. Even been known to make a few project logos in my time. It's not really like my core business, but I do quite like the challenge occasionally. And as Helen said, I've even branched out into recipes recently. So there's a couple of those on there. You can see more. I've got an Etsy shop set up, which you can see at that link there. A flapjack is kind of a combination of oats. I realized that I shouldn't have shared this as my example recipe because in the US, a flapjack is a pancake, right? What I call a pancake, sort of flat thing, like a. But yeah, flapjack is a really nice combination of kind of sugar and butter and oats, and in this case, chocolate and nuts. But there's other recipes on there as well, which I promise are a little bit more healthy. Some autumn ones up there now, and I need to make some more as well. So yeah, I've also got a book proposal together to try and make a book of those. So if anyone knows a publisher who wants to publish that, then let me know. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff that I work on. I thought I'd just talk for a little minute about kind of why I do what I do, and then maybe take a deeper dive into some of those graphics and how we make them if we have time. So first of all, can we try using the chat for this? I can't actually, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see the chat while I'm screen sharing. But if you could, I can, yeah. If you could type in why you think we visualize data, that would be amazing. And I will see if I can come across some of these because I always find it fascinating. There's always all sorts of different ways of thinking about this and what we do in terms of visualization. So I will got a couple coming in now. Make decisions. Oh, that's interesting. So you're sort of weighing things up, and because you can see them visually, you can make decisions about them. Oh, some great suggestions coming in here. Improve understanding. Yeah, okay. So that means that the information that you're trying to get across, you can see it when it's visualized, and then you kind of bring that out through understanding. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Communicate phenomena. So yeah, something you've observed and getting that across. So that kind of communication transfer that's coming across in that as well. Engaging, that's a really good point. So it's to actually sort of attract attention in the first place and kind of keep people's attention, perhaps in terms of engagement. I suppose you talk about that as well. Memory, that's another good one. Yeah, so you can actually recall the information from it better. I did a little bit of research about this in my postdoc and showing people information in different formats and then coming back in a couple of weeks later and see the information of that, the sort of amount that's remembered in different ways. That's true. Spot trends outliers quickly. So this is a different kind of way of using visualization where you are kind of pattern finding and trying to find what's happening within your data set and sort of interrogating it. So yeah, there's all sorts of different. It's so fascinating. Every time I do this, I get different responses from different people. Clarifying call for action. Oh, there's so many good suggestions. I hope I can read through them all. High bandwidth interface to the brain. Yeah, that's very 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 common. Where yeah, definitely. Communicating an idea, catching attention. Yeah, we've had that. Quicker to communicate. You quicker. Now that's a good one. Yeah, it does actually mean that you can get information transferred in a speedy manner sometimes. More beautiful. I mean, yeah, I think that's a really useful function sometimes. Um, nice. Okay, so some examples I've written down there. See if we've covered them all in there. I think we probably have. Efficient communication. So that was about speed, and we've also talked about sort of getting ideas across. We talked about, so quick overview does that as well. Engagement with audience, we talked about that. Emotive connection, sometimes this kind of idea that you can kind of get people's yeah, you kind of get a deep and meaningful sort of conversation with them through visuals that can be done. Enabling comparisons. I'm not sure we actually did that specifically. I think the closest was for the decision making one that was out that got out there first, the very very quick person there, where you have just kind of we're really good at processing things with our eyes. We did talk about the human visual processing system, but this idea that you can really kind of judge differences quite quickly visually and that all kind of goes into that. Condensing into a small space is one that I find useful. So the example that Helena shared with the what I call a gopher diagram, graphical overview for evidence reviews, where you have a lot of information all sort of in one small space. Selective focusing is a different one as well. That's where you kind of can focus your attention on different bits of it more easily. So tons and tons of reasons, but I often kind of think of it broken down into either exploring your data or explaining your data. And coincidentally, Explore Explain is the name of a really good podcast that you should check out. One of three data viz podcasts that I often listen to. It's a strange format perhaps for um, a visual thing. Still some suggestions coming in. Brilliant. Lower cognitive load, quicker communication of idea, store complex detailed memory. Yeah, love it. So I tend to sit on the explain side of this. I've often got a research paper in front of me. I'm trying to get that information out there. I'm trying to get it across to people who need it. And under that, people often talk about sort of data journalism, infographics, and storytelling is often a part of that as well, storytelling. The explore side, I don't know so much about. A lot of people from the business intelligence community, people who make data dashboards and kind of visual analytics often sit in this kind of side. And often there can be some which are kind of in the middle of these two, where to an extent, you're letting your viewer explore something on their own, but you're kind of more interested in the explaining side. And so there's a bit of a spectrum between the two. But yeah, I tend to sit more on this explain side. So forgive me if I don't know much about the left-hand side. And one of the things I think is really important for this that gets lost sometimes in data visualization is remembering the needs of your audience. And I'm going to steal an example, a classic example from Jacques Bertin now, where he was talking about the way that you can visualize data using maps. So if you're looking at this tabulated data of different regions in France, it's kind of difficult to tell. Like if I asked, is there generally more migration away from the southwest or the northeast of France in 2011? That would be kind of impossible to see from this set of numbers. Whereas if you show it on a map, you can say, okay, so rates of population change. Blue is high migration away from an area, and yellow is low. Now you can see is there more towards the west or the northeast. That kind of gives you a pattern. But if I asked you what's the rate of population change in Limousin, I mean, first you'd need to have good French geography, which I definitely do not have. But also, once you had found where it was, you'd sort of need to compare that to a color key, and it doesn't give you the exact value anyway. So if your audience wants to know the exact rate of population change in a particular place, this works better. Oh, look, Limousin, 4.9. That was really quick. So I think we t make this sort of generalization that visualization is always the best way of presenting information. But I think what we need to know is kind of what our audience needs from our information and how to get it. Um, and the kind of best way I think of doing that is to test it. It doesn't always need to be a scientific test, but it can always be good to just show it to a few people, show a visualization to some of your target audience, even if it's only two or three. I mean, ideal is about 6 to 10, but if it's less than that, then that's fine. Particularly people who aren't involved in the project. Obviously, I often share with collaborators, but if there's someone who's kind of just totally new to the information, it can really, really help. So if there's one thing I think we should sort of learning point for database to take away from it, I think that would be my main thing. And that's, just from my design background, that's kind of something that we could talk about a lot in graphic design and spend a lot of time on is kind of finding people's reactions to information. So how am I doing? We're half an hour in. I've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got three different things that I could talk about at this point. Yep, interactive to the core. So we've got, and I'll try and talk a little bit about how I engage people and tested these graphs all the way through while I show you a little bit more about how we made them. So we could either talk about BMJ Visual Abstracts in a bit more detail and show, I'll talk a little bit about kind of what we aim to do with those and how we tested them out. I could talk about the COVID transmission tool and how we developed that. We also did a bit of testing in that. Or I could talk about that kind of big Venn diagram freelance project that I did, which was a quicker project and there wasn't so much time for testing. But I can certainly take you through the kind of process that we went through to get the information right and how I kind of bounced that backwards and forwards. So should we use the chat again? Would you like to vote for one, two, or three? And I'll take the one with the most votes first. And if we have time, I'll do a second one. Okay, let's just have to do some summing up.
I can try help and actually, yeah, everyone.
It looks like the visual abstracts are going to win.
Yeah, I only see one for three, two for
Yeah,
two.
we've got two threes, two twos, and the rest are all ones. Oh no, we've got three threes now. Oh, I think three has just
Oh,
pipped it. So I will do visual abstracts, and then we'll skip the COVID tool, and then we will, if I have time, I'll do the hyperven later. Any late votes coming in? No, I think that's how we do it. Okay, so visual abstracts. I don't have to skip ahead in that case. Um, this is one of our visual abstracts. It's about testing whether we want to use Roxban for patients with DVT, and it's all patients are going to get Rivaroxaban, and some of them will have it for slightly longer. So it's about the kind of 6 versus 12 weeks regimen. We start with what are we looking at, and where was it published? Oh, it's a visual abstract. It's published in the BMJ. So that's kind of our first port of call. Top left-hand corner, it's quite an obvious big symbol. It's got a symbol. It's got identity. So that is kind of our way, almost like a marker of trust, or what's the source of it? Why should I look at this? The title, we edit this down quite a bit from the paper. We remove things like the study design and other information that's in the visual abstract anyway, which is mostly there for search engines, to be honest, and do something that's kind of more concise for the visual abstract. And we show the design anyway, so there's no point in reiterating it in the title. Um, we then give a quick summary of the conclusions of the paper, really. Scientific convention is to put this at the bottom. Journalistic convention is to put it at the top. Initially, we did put it at the bottom, and after testing, we decided actually the thing that people want to know is the top line when they first get to it. We've kind of turned that on its head. Well, we've gone with the journalistic tradition rather than the scientific tradition. We also have a little tick or cross for sort of positive and negative finding. Sometimes it's a little tricky. So we have used a question mark before now for sort of uncertain. Then we'll talk about the study design. It's usually pretty straightforward, and we try and break it up into different parts. So this is an RCT, and then you've got some features about it, double-blind 2-year follow-up. We can't show absolutely everything about it, but we just maybe try and choose three things that distinguish kind of what the ballpark of what we're looking at here. The population here, we normally try and include the number of people or entities that are participating in the research, and we normally have three or sometimes four different criteria about them. Sometimes we visualize these a bit. So, for example, we use like a little line to or a little bar to show the percentage of a particular gender or something like that. Uh, but it does vary from study to study. We don't present the same thing every time. It just depends on the condition and what is kind of relevant, I suppose. Then we will have an attractor. So this illustration here, in testing, sometimes people think that it takes up too much space or it's not performing a particular function, but actually, when you start testing stuff, you've got a bit of a captive audience, so it's a bit tricky because this is what I like to refer to as the welcoming gesture. I don't know if you're familiar with Jen Christian. She made the book Communicating Science Graphics. She works for Scientific American, and that's her term. I think it's a really good one, where you are aiming to just bring people into the piece and say set the scene of it in a fraction of a second. So the good thing about an illustration is that it's just there and it's immediate, whereas reading a title takes, you know, a lot longer than just passing an image. It's almost kind of showing you this is for you. This is related to your interest if it's a good illustration. And it will show you something about the kind of setting the scene. So that's the welcoming gesture, very important. Then we're showing how the people randomized, which interventions they were exposed to, and then anything that's kind of common between the two groups, we show it just once rather than twice. So we've got a common thing at the top here. They all got 6 weeks of river span, and then you've got the difference below. And then we have our outcomes. It's usually some kind of forest plot. Um, Always try and present both the absolute values. So this is the percentages of people um, uh, experiencing the outcome in both arms, and then we have the kind of relative thing so that you can compare it easily in the middle. Um, and then we highlight those usually in a kind of aqua color. We don't use green and red because of color blindness, but we kind of use aqua and pink. Um, Aqua if it's a benefit, pink if it's a harm, and we color code them if the lines don't touch one, essentially, just so you can sort of it's just a quick convention. We don't really put it in as a key anywhere or anything. It's just if you've seen lots of other visual abstracts, it's something that you can kind of get used to, I suppose. And then at the bottom we have sometimes kind of if we've got your attention and this is something you need to learn more about, how do you go about doing that? Um, there's a shortened link down there which is easier to type than the big long URL that the journal produces, and sometimes we'll put the trial ID as well. Not that often. I mean, not all of our visual abstracts are about trials for a start, but sometimes we'll do that. So there's always kind of a bit of a tension between the reading speed and the amount of information contained. So we try and keep the type at 24 pixels, and we've got a 1000 by 1000 pixel display, and we have no exceptions to that. No smaller text, no more information. That is all we have. So sometimes we have to cut things out, and it sometimes takes a bit of that backwards and forwards to find out what we want to do. I guess we have the benefit that everything is there in the paper, but the idea is that they should be legible and they should be sort of quick to read, and there we are, and that's how we do it. And we've kind of developed them quite a bit over the years. So this is our first visual abstract from back in 2018 compared to this one, which was, I think, published in 2022. So it's about 4 years of kind of change over that time. And the way we've done that is, first of all, we did some surveys when we first launched them. I think we just sent them out via X or Twitter at the time, as it was called, and just got people to kind of give us their thoughts on them, what they thought they were, what they liked about them, what they didn't like about them, what we could remove, what we could add in, and that kind of really helped us. I took it to a few design-related conferences. Information Plus conference in Potsdam was brilliant. I've presented it there, and I got a lot of really good feedback from the designers there. I think that's one of really big things actually was to reduce the size of all of the bits at the bottom, just to sort of, give a bit more space and put more headings in so that people knew what they were looking at during the time. So we've kind of continued to evolve them over time, respond to any feedback that we get, actually go out and seek feedback as well. And then it was also involved in a bit of standard setting. There's a paper that we published earlier this year about the development of this kind of reporting infographics and visual abstracts checklist, which you can kind of go through when you're making any kind of visual abstract or infographic that's trying to summarize a research paper. You can go through and just check all of these elements and check what you've done. And actually, as a part of that, we decided that there were some more refinements that we needed to make. We did a big kind of Delphi panel and sort of asked people what they thought was important to include in visual abstracts as a kind of guidance for people making them. And as part of that, we realized that we did relatively well. Like we had most of the information in here, but apparently, first of all, we weren't very clear on which were the primary outcomes of the study. It turns out that it's the composite efficacy and the major bleeding were the two primary outcomes, and that wasn't shown there. Um, so we kind of thought about how to do that. Should we remove the non-primary outcomes, or should we just badge them as primary? And then we also noticed that the number of people actually completing the trial wasn't shown. It shows the randomization numbers. So we needed to either put a lot more numbers in there, which would have been quite kind of could have been quite kind of overwhelming and take away from the sort of quick way of reading it, or we could just show the percent dropping out. In the end, we decided actually we would change it to the just the number of people that were actually went through to the analysis, so you can sort of see the dropout from the you can see the number of people recruited, the number of people randomized, and the number of people in the analysis at the end. That kind of gives you enough information of all the three different steps, but without laboring the point too much. And as you can see, we've added those primary outcome badges as well, so those come uh, uh, appear on all of our visual abstracts now. So again, it's kind of a process of reaching out and finding communities that are prepared to kind of help us test these things. We don't have a lot of resource to test them ourselves while we're publishing, but it's kind of collaborating with universities doing research and working out how best we can do that, and to sort of light touch um, pragmatic surveys and things like that through social media, and responding to feedback and presenting at conferences is how we've kind of refined that design as we go forwards. So we're up to about 40 minutes. Helen, did you want me to finish now and take questions, or should I do the Venn diagram quickly to talk about that?
Um, I think you can spend another 4 or 5 minutes surely on
Okay,
number three because
sure thing. I
or,
will.
or did had you planned a half an hour?
No, no, that's fine. No problem at all. I can do another 5 minutes. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. So this was the a very long project in that to make the COVID-19 transmission diagram, working with the UK's Scientific Advisory Committee for Emergencies, SAGE, and some people from Cambridge University, and we did a bit of testing as we went through here as well, and refined things as we went. That project was a massive one that took like a year, maybe more than a year, probably the longest one that I've worked on yet. And I wanted to do as a contrast to that to show you some of the much more kind of um, low to the ground, quick, efficient stuff that I do for my freelance work. So this was, as I say, a PhD student who came to me with this data set and wanted to know how to visualize it. And it was quite tricky because there were lots of different categories. She was interested. So she had about 80 papers, I think, and then some of them had military authorship, some of them had military funding, some of them had military journals that they were published in, or other kinds of journals. Um, and I was very inspired by a talk that I saw from Nadi Brenner, who is based in the Netherlands and does a lot of work for she's an astronomer by background, but a brilliant data visualization specialist, and I think a brilliant designer as well. This is a piece that she did on satellites, where she visualized every single one of the satellites in this kind of way, and then categorized them and colored them, and gave them all a little bit of individuality. And I think I wanted to try and do something like that. So we tried a few different ways of doing that. First of all, I often start with a pencil and paper. In this case, actually, it's an iPad and an Apple Pencil, but it's the same kind of principle where um, it's kind of the quickest way of getting ideas down. So I would throw kind of four ideas at the collaborators, and when we'd all discuss them. So this is another way of getting feedback very, very quickly, as to kind of which way to go about it. We decided that the kind of Venn approach was good, but we were concerned that there was a massive other category at the bottom there. So we decided to mark that here. Yeah. And then we decided to maybe break down things a bit more, still a big other category, to military main author, military other author, military funding, military publication. But then we decided to look at being published in a military location or being published in trauma, surgery, or emergency medicine, which kind of took that other category down a little bit more. And then we thought, well, let's break it down even further and have military main author, military other author, military funding sort of in the middle, and then the published location down the side. And then we managed to get kind of everything into a box then. There is another box there as well at the bottom. Refine those a bit to kind of make the bubbles fit to the number of articles in there a bit. So here I'm actually drawing all the real data, knowing how many there are in each box. Did a bit of work on what the actual symbols were going to look like. Whether we'd use the sort of sentiment, whether the paper was for, neutral, or against this training technique of using live animal models. And then what else? What would the secondary dimension be? Would it be newer to older, or would it be primary research, secondary research, or opinion? We went for that as the way of doing it. Looked at different shapes, how they would all fit together. And then we started actually building up the design for it, looking at colors, looking at the kind of color scale there. Then I kind of dropped it into D3, I think. We sort of made this basic grid in Illustrator and then dropped all the data in D3, used a bit of a clustering algorithm to sort of cluster them around each of the squares. And then they were kind of grouped up so that I could sort of go back into Illustrator and play around with them, adjust the size of the different groups a little bit to see kind of, which ones would fit where and how to do that. Um, I suggested that they really wanted to see the kind of links between the papers and which ones referenced each other. And I sent them this version to thinking that they would say, "Oh yeah, that's too messy. No, we definitely can't do that." And they loved it. So I had to try and put that in as well. Refined the shapes a bit in Illustrator, so again to kind of fit the data set a bit better. Back into D3, and then I kind of coded up a way that I could drag these circles around and the lines attached to them individually, so that I could kind of shuffle them a bit, and then store the positions, the XY coordinates of all of them as in a spreadsheet, and so that it would kind of save them. And then I had to refine change the outlines. Had to refine the lines again a bit to kind of get them working. Um, Designed all these sort of outside stuff, moved everything around and refined the lines. Oh no, I haven't refined the lines again, but I've moved all the papers around again to kind of fit there. And then for the link lines, we've put on a little bit of a gradient that shows you which whether it's which one is referencing the other. So the darker end is the paper that's referencing the one at the lighter end. Okay, so that's a good 5 minutes, isn't it? So that project is, I should say, rather than taking a year, that one took maybe about 4 days of work from my perspective, about 28 hours. Um, and so we did it over a period of 2 months, so it's because there was quite a lot of sort of feedbacks and backwards and forwards, and sort of communicating with the authors and working out what they needed and their requirements, and getting them to show them to other people that were naive to the project, and getting their take on it so that we could get that working out. And a lot of that was around kind of the how to read the map section, how to order that, which order to show people the different variables in. Um, Cool. I'll stop there. We're at 45 minutes past and say thank you very much for listening to my talk. I've got a blog there where I occasionally update with sort of things I've been working on, and you can find my contact details there if you're interested in commissioning me for any freelance work. And I still use X or Twitter for a sort of occasional commentary on graphics that we publish and insights to the journal, so you could follow me there. And for that, I'll take any questions. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
First of all, I'll stop the recording so we can have the Q&A in secrecy.